Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to be playing around with a technique today, well, a variation of a technique that I have seen in several videos. Now this one is some of the results. This one is a couple of inks layered up and the yellow one is just one layer of the ink. Now I have seen this technique done with Glad wrap or cling film, and you add water reactive inks and then you add lots of water on it and pop the Glad wrap or the cling film on top and then leave it there to set and dry, and that way you get all of these amazing kind of texture marks. Well, I want to do a different version of that where I don't have to leave it to dry. It's just an instant result. So I have a piece of Glad wrap here or cling film and I'm going to scrunch it up just a little bit. Now I am going to be using some pigment inks today. Now pigment ink is important and I'm going to show you the results later on of what happens if you use dye inks and hybrid inks, but I'm going to be using the VersaFine clear inks today to do this technique, and that definitely works best in my opinion. So this is the Distress Oxide one and this is the results I got. Now this is two different colors here on the Glad wrap, but I can kind of see the squares of where the ink pad went down, and I just didn't like this version as much. I didn't feel like the creases of the Glad wrap were as clear. Then I went ahead and used some dye inks. These are the Simon Hurley ones obviously, and again I got a totally different look. I do like this look, but it's just totally different than what I could get using pigment inks. This one is the secondary pull from it, and I also added a bit of red, which I like, but not as much again as the pigment inks. So these are the ones from the pigment inks. It has these big, bold kind of crinkles and wrinkles that I really love. So again, use what you have in your stash and try it out and see how you go. But today I'm going to take you through making some of the prints, and then we're going to turn it into a card. Now this is a gorgeous yellow from VersaFine Clear, and I'm going to just kind of tap it up and down on the Glad wrap. Remember, I just gently, lightly scrunched it. I have some of the 100-pound Recollections branded paper. Then I just have a scrap piece on top so that I can press it down nicely without getting ink all over my fingers. I just press it down as evenly as I can, then bring up the scrap piece of paper, and then I get the most gorgeous results from that Glad wrap, and I love this look. I had so much fun creating these pieces. I just kept going and going and going. Now I'm going to put down the same colored ink again, and then what I'm going to do to create a little more texture is spread it out so you can see some of those wrinkles kind of appear again, and again that's going to give us some really nice texture. You can just keep playing and playing with this technique. There is really no end to it, and I really enjoyed layering up some of the colors, making sure I either had contrasting colors or similar colors. It was really fun just to have a big play around, and as I said, I was able to turn it into one of my favorite cards that I have created. So you can see some really nice big kind of wrinkles in that one. Then what I tend to do is I tend to move away from that color, and I just take the piece of Glad wrap really carefully and pop it on my desk, because I just had a really big session, and if I use a similar color then I'll come back to that piece. But if I'm going to use a color that's really different, for example moving on to this gray, this is the Morning Mist color, then I am going to use a fresh piece of Glad wrap. So I wrinkle it up just a little bit with my fingers. I mean, as I said, have a play with how much you want to wrinkle it up, have a play with how much you want to straighten it out again, pop down your fresh piece of paper, and then you get these really gorgeous results, and it is different every time. There is no way to repeat the same pattern, and here I'm going to do a second pull without even straightening out the Glad wrap or anything. I just put it straight back down. So even doing a second generation pull here, the results are absolutely gorgeous. They are much lighter than the first one, but I still get all of those beautiful wrinkles and creases. So I do go ahead and dab up a little bit more extra ink, but you can just fill in any spaces that you think have too much white space. But that one is going to be maybe a favorite of mine, and I'm definitely going to use a good few of these prints today to create my card, and I'm going to use them in lots of different ways. Moving on to the Monarch color, this is a really quite a deep dark purple from VersaFine Clear, and I'm just dabbing the ink pad up and down, up and down. I'm not kind of swiping it along. Now, I also didn't try this, but who's to say that you can't do this with acrylic paints and see what you get there if you just use a paintbrush to apply them. I mean, so many different things. You can try all different, even like watercolors, paints, or you can try all different mediums and see what results that you get. I'm doing a second pull from this one here. I put it down in a slightly different place, so I've got a wee line of ink mark to the left, but these are some of the prints that I created just now, and we are going to turn these into a card. So I really like both the strong first generation pulls and the second ones. I have a Woodware craft collection stamp here. This is just a really small stamp set called Daisies, and I just really like the kind of whimsical style of these little flowers here, so I'm going to use a couple of them for this project. Now I'm using some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm just going to stamp right over top of the two kind of darker pulls, the one I did of the purple and the yellow. The yellow ones are absolutely gorgeous. I was not sure at this point what I was kind of going to end up with, and I wasn't too sure of the color scheme, so you'll find out what I do in the end. But all of these look really nice, but I did think it needed broken up by a little bit of green. Now this is one of the ones that I showed you in the beginning, and this was a the same yellow as that's on the left, but I did add a green pull over top. And I'm just going to use this to stamp that little leaf to the side. I'm too lazy to get out a whole different stamp set, so I just partially stamped some of the flower, and I will use these later on. Then, just to add a little more texture to the flowers, I have a stencil here, which is I think it's Falling Snow, and I'm just going to add the same yellow, the exact same yellow, with some finger daubers, and you can see it just adds a little bit more to the flowers, a little bit more solid colour. So I like how that kind of rounds out the flowers, and I just shift the stencil around so I've got as many dots as I can get on each petal, because I am going to be cutting these out. I don't think that there is a coordinating die to go with these. The Woodware collection don't often seem to have coordinating dies, although I would absolutely love it if they decided to do that. So I am going to fussy cut these out today. Now these are nice and easy. They've just got nice rounded edges, so it didn't take me too long to cut all of these out. And then with the leaves, I just cut out the leaf shape, and then at the bottom I just left it however, because I knew I would be tucking them under the flowers. So for the flowers themselves, I'm actually cutting off that leaf part, and so it's just the flower with the 5 petals, and then the leaves I will cut out separately. So I'm going to skip through all this part, but one thing, if you are going to fussy cut, then I think it is really important to come in with a nice black marker, any type of black marker, and from the back of your flower, go around the edges and get rid of that white core of the cardstock, and this makes you look like a fussy cutting pro. It will cut out any little white bits where you've just gone over the edges or haven't quite cut perfectly. This will definitely help you out in your fussy cutting. Now I was deciding whether I wanted to use the lighter or the darker grey version here, but I have gone for the lighter grey. I am layering up 2 of the ovals from the Hero Arts Infinity Oval set, and I'm just popping them together because I want to create a frame. I'm going to put them here so that it cuts out the oval in the middle, and then I'm going to keep these together, and I'm going to keep that oval there because, as I said, I'm going to build up a frame. So I die cut out a few more of those, so I have 3 altogether. Then, using the same Morning Mist grey ink as is on the background there, I'm going to use a finger dauber and actually just make sure that that is nice and grey, because I thought that I was going to put that one on top to create a nice dark grey oval border. However, I kind of got to this point and was like, it just didn't feel right. I just wanted a white border. I didn't want it to stand out that much, and it just stood out a little too much for my liking, so I ended up gluing it to the bottom of that pile. It still gives me the dimension, and I didn't waste the border, but I just didn't want the dark grey colour after all. I'm cutting down a little bit of this so that when it goes on my card base, I will have a nice border here, and this bit is going to go down flat onto my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. I'm just using some liquid glue. That's the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish inside those glue bottles, and this is the Happy Birthday sentiments from Waffle Flower. Any nice big sentiment could go inside of this. It doesn't have to be a birthday card at all. You can use anything for any occasion. I'm going to use a stamping platform just because I didn't want to mess it up at this stage. I'm using the same Morning Mist grey. I'm not introducing any new colours, and I didn't want to use black because I felt like it would be a little too stark, but I am going to stamp it twice, and that made it kind of nice and dark as well. Then adding a little bit of the liquid glue to the frame, and of course it just pops right inside that oval because we cut it from the same dies, and I didn't take apart the dies in between cutting them, where I had used the low-tack tape to hold them together. Then I have a piece of twine here. I'm adding some liquid glue right around the outside border of that oval, and then I'm just going to sit this right in here, and I love this look. I'm really, really happy with how this card came out, and as I said, I think it's one of my favorites. So I'm just going to cut it off there so it's nice and smooth edging. I'm going to cover that up with a flower anyway, so we won't be able to see where it actually finishes. Then I'm just going to kind of bend in and then out the edges of all the flowers, the petals here, and this just gives them a little bit of dimension so they sit up off the page a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of the flowers, and then here I'm just laying them out to see where I think I would like them to go. It's about at this point where I felt like the purple ones didn't quite fit with what I wanted, and I really like the look of just the yellow ones. I'm going to use a little bit of foam tape because I have that border there that has 3 layers of cardstock and then that piece of twine around it, so I will add a tiny little foam square or half a foam square to one side of the flower, and then the other side will sit up on top of that little border so it's nice and even and it has plenty to hold it in place. Again, once this liquid glue dries, it's a really, really strong glue, so I don't have any worries about it coming off or coming apart when the recipient receives this one. Now, I'm really pleased that I went to the effort to cut out those little green leaves because I feel like they set this image off and just create the perfect amount of contrast. So I'm going to slip those underneath so that all you can see is that proper stamped part and not the part that I just kind of cut randomly at the bottom. And then just to finish it off, as a very last thing, you could either use some Nuvo drops or enamel dots or anything to go in the middle here, and that just feels like it finishes off the flowers nicely. And that finishes up my card for today. I had so much fun creating this one, and I have gone ahead and done so many prints, and then I just basically copied this card and kept going and did this with lots of different versions. I really like the simplicity of it, but I love the texture behind the flowers and the background. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have found this video useful. I will put links to everything in the description box below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!